Hello, fellow book loving friends. My name is, thank you for joining me for my tea talk in June and welcome to my writing world. My name is Dee Armstrong. Some of you already know me. I'm a romance and suspense author, and I leave a fingerprint on your heart. But I'm not only a writer, I'm a mom, a teaholic, a gardening ninja, and my grandma name is Lolly. Pour a cup of your favorite decaffeinated beverage and wrap some chocolate and let's chat. Now, I got a little bit messed up in the beginning there, you guys, because I'm trying a new program and I'm supposed to right now have oh, there it is. It's on there. Okay, sorry. My overlay isn't showing on my side, but it is on your side. So good. We're all good. Finally, subscribe, even though I'm a little bit nutty, so you don't miss anything. Share, like, tell your friends about me. Yes, me, Dee Armstrong, my books. And if you like romance, ghosts, a good mystery, you'll love my books. Let me leave a fingerprint on your heart. Now, in honor of Father's Day, I'm celebrating all dads. And I would like to share the lessons I learned from dad. Now, let me switch over here. There we go. You could have called my dad an ordinary man. He didn't come from royal bloodlines and wasn't a town leader or a famous athlete or a superstar. He was dad. Those three little letters, DAD, represented the world in a small child's eyes, in my eyes. An ordinary man committed to providing for and supporting his family. He didn't have hobbies. Sure, he enjoyed a cold beer and an NFL football game once in a while, but his family was his life. He was a humble man at heart, unaware of how much goodness and strength he had instilled in his children. I doubt he realized the life lessons that we caught and understood from his daily actions, how he distinguished right from wrong, and the essence of being an honorable, tolerant, forgiving human being. I want to share a few lessons that I learned from Dad. Lesson one: you can do anything just because you are you. Everything you need to succeed is already inside of you. I can remember asking Dad if he thought that I could do something. It didn't matter what it was. Do you think I could climb that mountain, play basketball? Do you think I could be a writer? His reply was always, "Of course you can. You're an Armstrong. You can do anything." He breathed belief into his kids by making them proud of their last name, proud of the stock they come from. The words, "Of course you can," flowed out of him with enough sincerity and conviction that you knew deep down in your heart that they were true. Now, lesson two: people can only tear you down if you let them. Like every little kid, I went to my dad with my scrapes and bruises. Some of the hardest scrapes and scars to fix are the ones that happen in our heart or within our mind. I would come to my dad with those too. Sometimes he told me to toughen up. Mostly he told me, don't let them beat you. They can only win if you let them. He told me things like, it's going to be okay. You're tougher than you think. And my favorite, don't worry, they can't eat you. Only the IRS can eat you. The underlying message was always the same: you can do it. Lesson three: see the possibilities within everyday situations by seeing what is possible when no one else can. My dad worked in construction for over 50 years. He built amazing things, from hospitals to high schools to hotels to homes. He could look at a broken building or a barren strip of land and see possibilities. I'd watch and think, you're not going to fix that. And the project would take shape and grow into a finished product. He was the guy they called in when a job had gone horribly wrong or was not going to finish on time, when it was high pressure and millions of dollars on the line. If a hotel didn't open in time, Dad was your man. He always came through. He was a make a way, find a way kind of man. He saw possibilities and offered solutions when others only saw failure. He passed that skill down to his children, especially his boys, who have gone on to build great things also. Now, lesson 4. No matter what, your family loves and believes you. I'm not sure how I knew this. I cannot place my finger on what my parents said to make me hold this as fact. But I know in my heart, if I had to, I could have always gone home if things got bad. At the same time, there have been times and instances where I've wanted to go home, lick my wounds, and stay within the comfort of my parents' home. But my dad said no. He told me to stay, face my situation, stick with it, or fight for what was right. Those were some of the hardest times for me. I know it was hard for my dad to tell me no, but those situations were also growing times for me. One of those times, I was 22, 6 months pregnant, and alone in Germany. My husband was deployed to the Middle East, and the Army didn't give a date for his return. I wanted to go home. I remember calling Dad and crying to him over the phone, telling him I can't do it. I can't handle being alone. I'm scared. I don't want to have this baby on my own. And he replied in that slow way of his voice full of love, not allowing for doubt. He said, Deanne, you're going to have this baby. There's no going back on that. He chuckled, not a funny ha ha chuckle, but a good natured, everything will be okay chuckle that I can still hear. His voice turned fatherly firm, and he added, But you can do this. You need to be there in case your husband comes home. I stayed, an ocean away from family. It was hard. It was lonely. My husband came home 2 weeks before our little girl was born. And if I had taken the easy way and gone home to Colorado, my husband and I wouldn't have been together for the birth of our first child. I'm thankful for Dad's advice. Lesson 5. Sometimes people don't like you when you make them stretch and grow out of their comfort zone. Growing up, I thought my dad was wonderful. He was kind and loving. Who wouldn't like him, right? I remember visiting one of my dad's jobs in Vail, Colorado. He was building a hotel, a big, beautiful hotel located at the base of the mountain. Skiers would be able to ski down the slopes right to their hotel room. In my eyes, it was a big deal, and my dad was making it possible. On every job site, the only bathroom was a porta potty. Not a big deal, but this time I went into the porta potty and came out with an education. On the walls inside, people wrote what they thought about my dad by using 4-letter words and vocabulary I probably shouldn't have understood. And I remember running out shouting, Dad, Dad, you won't believe what it says about you on the walls of the porta potty. It's not nice. Dad laughed. He walked with me, slowing his gait to match my smaller stride. Deanne, he told me, some people don't want to hear what they have to do it again or do it right. They get upset when I tell them to fix things. Don't worry about it. He brushed his huge hand across my head, laughed, and walked away to an elevator shaft with his voice booming out commands. I watched as my dad, decades older than any man on his crew, and a hip that couldn't bend, climb into that shaft. In front of me, 2 workers stood watching. One told the other that he wouldn't go in there. It was too dangerous. And my heart shifted into overdrive. I held my breath. I watched. I waited to see if my father would be okay. My father held on to the edge of the shaft, leaning into the open hole, and evaluated the situation. Together, the men and my dad figured out how to make that elevator work. He didn't have to climb in to help. He was the boss, but he did. As an adult, I realized my dad knew what was written in the porta potty. He used it every day. He didn't let it change how he viewed his crew. He worked alongside his men and completed the job the right way and on time. Lesson 6. Anything worth doing is worth doing right, even the little jobs, the ones you think don't matter. Those jobs are most important because you will know if you did them right or not. All the kids in my family helped on my dad's jobs. Some of us were more skilled than others. I was always on the cleanup crew or in the office. No job was too small to dad. Every job was important, and his kids started with the grunt work and worked their way up. Now, grunt work was my specialty when I was younger. My dad handed me a broom or a vacuum, a rag, a razor blade, and told me to get to work. I used the razor blade to remove excess caulk or paint from the windows. I cleaned up and made sure the job shined. Dad would inspect behind me, telling me, like he told everybody else, where to fix and how to do it better. On one vacuum, I'm sorry, on one job, the vacuum and I became best buddies. I named the vacuum Freddie. With Freddie in tow, I sucked up dirt and sheetrock dust. I picked up trash, cleaned and washed windows. I learned how to pay attention to details. Every day Dad drove me home and I climbed into bed exhausted. I kept at it under my dad's watchful eye with a typical teenager attitude, rolling my eyes at how unimportant my job was, who would really notice if there was a little paint on the windows, until the day my dad's boss walked through the job. The boss praised me on how clean the job site looked and what a great job did. My dad smiled and he said, "That's my daughter." The boss replied, "Of course she is, Dale. I should have known." That day, I learned how important it was to do your best. That day, I learned how my actions reflected on my family. That day, I felt my dad's pride wash over me. How different that memory would be if I hadn't and didn't give it my all. Maybe if my dad hadn't inspected what he expected from me. Lesson 7. Got that one a little flipped. Be truthful or honest with people, even when they don't want to hear it, even if it will hurt the one you love. Dad was a great guy. You knew where you stood with Dad. If you messed up, he'd tell you. To him, all men and women were created equal. One time, Dad was called in to meet with the big bosses. He didn't put on a suit or his best jeans. He'd walk in with his distinctive gait into a fancy boardroom wearing his work boots, faded Levi's, and a work shirt over his Hanes white t-shirt. His hip didn't bend, so he would sit kind of crooked and slightly angled back in his chair. The boss asked questions. The heads of the other jobs wanted to please their boss and gave the answers they thought he wanted. Dad remained quiet. After everyone had their say, the boss said, "So what do you think, Dale?" My dad never minced words. He said how he saw it, whether it was what the boss wanted to hear or not. He knew it was what the boss needed to hear to finish the job. Because of Dad's honesty and straight answers, the boss realized he could trust him, and that trust turned into a lifelong friendship. As an adult, I learned never to call Dad unless you wanted the bare truth. If you wanted things sugar coated, he was not the one to ask. In exchange, I valued his opinion. I knew he'd tell it to me straight, and then I could make my own decisions with his input. Lesson 8. Always have a place to think. Dad had his garage. The large metal structure was his place to detox, to have time to himself, or to think. It was his domain and his world, a place where he could just contemplate or just be. As a child, his garage was a quiet place for me to talk to him about my problems. He never criticized. He'd say, "You think so, Deanne?" Then he would state what he felt. He didn't argue his point. He let me come to a conclusion on my own. As time went on and I grew into an adult, I had adult decisions to make. Then Dad started to say, "I can't answer that for you. You'll have to make that decision on your own." He knew that I'd have to live with the consequences of my decisions, and I learned to have a place to think. Lesson 9. Never speak badly about your spouse, and never allow your children to speak badly about their mother to you. When my dad spoke the words to love, honor, and cherish till death do us part, he meant those words. He made a sacred oath to his wife, himself, and to God. He showed me that if you love someone, you love all of them, the good and the bad. Now, I feel like I need to clarify here because everyone's in a different situation. That doesn't mean that if you're in an abusive marriage that you're stuck forever. No. My dad would not have told you to stay. He would have helped you. My parents' situation wasn't that, and I'm very glad. I'm very blessed that it wasn't. Now, I could come to my dad about anything except to criticize my mother. I remember coming to my dad once in my teen years, full of anger and self importance, telling him how wrong my mother was, how she didn't know anything. He shut me down mid sentence. He didn't have time for that kind of talk. He sent me on my way, my ears ringing from the heat of his words. My dad wasn't a man of many words until it came to defending his wife. My parents were a united front, a team. I learned that marriage is a team effort, and with give and take on both sides. My parents celebrated 55 years of marriage before my father passed. Lesson 10. The greatest lesson I learned was perseverance. My dad had Perthes disease as a child. He was diagnosed in the third grade and missed the last 2 weeks of school. The bones in his left hip dissolved, and he had an operation in which the doctors chipped a part of the bone out of his right leg and placed that bone in a pin in his left hip. Once he left the hospital, he spent a year in a body cast, spent almost all of fourth grade in bed. His mother used to take old irons and hang them. I don't know if you remember the old irons that were metal, cast iron. Irons like ironing clothes, that type of an iron, and she would hang them off his foot to help straighten his legs. Now this was in the 1940s. He missed 2 years of school. His mother homeschooled him, and a teacher came in to give him tests. And my dad, Mr. Super love this guy, was remembered by Dr. Hall as the patient who never complained. And he's remembered that he never complained to me either. When my dad was 13, his father wasn't feeling well and returned home from a doctor visit. The plan was his father would change out of his work clothes and return to the hospital for more tests. His father sat down on the couch to talk with him, and in the middle of their conversation, his father had a massive stroke. A blood clot had worked its way up to his brain. His father passed away before help could arrive. When I was in the fourth grade, my dad worked on a construction site in Wyoming. He was unloading sheetrock from a truck. The wind caught the sheetrock and slammed it against his head and neck, and he was partially paralyzed on the right side. He had a wife and 5 children to support. My mom worked, but her income wasn't enough. He subsidized their income by trucking water until he regained control of the full movement of his right side. For the rest of his life, on an almost daily basis, he suffered from migraines. I always found comfort walking with my dad. His slowed gait, the way his body swayed. My dad walked with a limp, and his foot had completely turned inward so that he walked on the outside of his foot instead of the bottom. He had to send his work boots out to be built up to enable him to walk. He didn't care. He always showed me his spiffy new shoes. Some people might have considered my dad handicapped, not him or his family. I never heard my dad complain. He always said that's just the way it was. So, having learned these lessons from my dad, I've changed my mind. My dad was an extraordinary man, an extraordinary man who kept moving forward no matter what life dealt him. To me, he was a king, the leader of our family, an athlete who conquered injuries, and a superstar on the stage of my life. Today, I realize how extremely blessed I was to be able to pick up a phone and call him anytime I wanted. When we ended our conversations, he would tell me, I love you. 3 simple words that warmed a heart. And also, and also, the final lesson: always tell your children I love you before saying goodbye. I hope you enjoyed lessons I learned from Dad. What lessons did you learn from your dad? Or what lessons are you handing down to your children? Thank you for listening. Let's go back here. Thank you for listening. Just to touch base with you, have you signed up for my newsletter? If not, there's a link in this chat. And we have Spill the Tea coming up, everyone. I'm excited to say. A quick reminder, our next Spill the Tea book chat is June 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and 10 a.m. Pacific. I will be spilling on Mind Games by Nora Roberts. I'm always so bad at the Vanna stuff. And I even practiced today. Mind Games by Nora Roberts. I hope I didn't make you guys feel dizzy there. And this book is signed and I am giving it away. I'm also giving away your choice of any of my books. Well, that's it for me, Dee. As always, thank you for spending time with me. I'll keep the kettle warm until next time. Hugs. Bye for now, everyone.